Can't wait until May 23rd to get your X-Men fix? No worries, we've got a roundup of the 7 things we've just learned about X-Men Days of Future Past right here. X-Men Days of Future Past director Bryan Singer was MIA at this weekend's WonderCon in Anaheim, seemingly due to the wake of his recent public scandal. But X-Men writer and producer Simon Kinberg was on hand to represent the studio and gave out a lot of insight into what we can expect from the highly anticipated X-Men Days of Future Past, which of course hits theaters on May 23rd. So to recap all of the gems from the weekend, we are bringing you 7 things we learned about Days of Future Past at this year's WonderCon. This is your warning though that spoilers may lie ahead. Our first tidbit came when Kinberg told a crowd at the X-Men panel that Days of Future Past is kind of an apology to the fans. He said, "This and the Dark Phoenix are the 2 most famous stories. We could have done better with the Dark Phoenix." He is of course referencing how Dark Phoenix's storyline played out in the less than stellar X-Men The Last Stand. And we all know that admitting that you have a problem is the first step to recovery, right? He went on to say that Days of Future Past is our attempt to right the wrongs of the past, and he even told Crave Online that he still carries around residual guilt from what happened in The Last Stand. The second thing we have some clarification on are those trailers we've seen with Professor X walking around and not being tied to the wheelchair. Well, Kinberg shed a little light on that situation, saying that we will, quote, see an ass-kicking Professor X in this film, and that the reason behind young Xavier not being in a wheelchair will be a huge part of the story, and that his character arc will really be about, quote, accepting his place in the chair, embracing that. Kinberg also said that more than anything else in the story, Xavier's young, broken, and messed up circumstances, which includes losing his legs, losing his sister that he raised, and of course losing his closest friend, are a big emotional part of the reason why Charles becomes Professor X. Number 3, so we will definitely see Charles as the hero and the protagonist in this story, but he's not going to be the only centerpiece in the movie, you guys. Kinberg also revealed that Raven, or Mystique, will be the MacGuffin of the plot, which means that the entire story will revolve around her, which after seeing the trailers, it was kind of hinted that that was going to be the case. And speaking of Raven and Mystique, Kinberg clarifying that the struggle of the movie is, quote, is she the Raven that Charles raised, or is she the Mystique that Eric wanted to turn her into, this sort of warrior? If she leans towards the Eric Mystique choice, she will carry out an assassination, which many fanboys know about from the comics. That decision would of course lead to a very dark, apocalyptic type future for not only her, but for human and mutant kind alike. However, if she decides to go in a more positive direction, she can avoid that dark future. And while we're on the topic of Mystique's future, fans are still curious about that Mystique spin-off movie that's been rumored, and that is our number 4. Kinberg says that he knows that Jennifer Lawrence loves playing Mystique, but that he's not spoken to the Oscar-winning actress about doing a standalone movie. And even though they have taken her makeup time as Mystique down from a grueling 8 hours to about 3 or 4 hours, we think that Fox will really have to twist her arm, being that she's publicly mentioned that Jennifer Lawrence is looking to take a break from acting once all of her big commitments are done, like the Hunger Games. Now, our 5th interesting fact has to do with James Cameron. Yes, I said James Cameron. The Avatar director was slightly involved during the X-Men Days of Future Past creative process, and according to Kinberg, he was brought in to help give advice on the many time-traveling narratives that we know will come to play in the new film. Kinberg revealed that Cameron, quote, gave us advice and scientific evidence to study, and we're thinking he probably provided more advice than evidence, being that regardless of how many times you watch Back to the Future, time traveling is not possible, people. At number 6, we know that this movie will be jam-packed with some of our favorite X-Men characters, but one character that we will not see in the movie is Rogue. At least we think. We knew that Anna Paquin was on set to play the character and shot some scenes for Days of Future Past, but we had heard that her scenes, which apparently only amounted to about 10 minutes or so, were essentially cut. Last week, BuzzFeed got some info from a source that suggested that Rogue would in fact still appear in the film, and her name is still listed in the credits as of now. Well, Kinberg told Crave that Rogue initially got the axe, because her role didn't fit into the story the way that they had originally planned. He said, quote, "It was a subplot that I created, sort of an appendage to the movie, because I wanted to do something else that didn't serve the main plot of the film." However, Kinberg also didn't say for certain that we wouldn't see her either. He said, "I can't speak to any other rumors about any other way she could appear in the film, but I can tell you that the main plot that we shot with her, we pulled out of the movie." Now, the seventh and final tidbit that we learned from Simon Kinberg is that he definitely has an opinion on whether or not we could see other Marvel characters like Spider-Man showing up in future X-Men movies. And to get those awesome details, you gotta click right here. So there you have it, 7 things that we learned about X-Men Days of Future Past from WonderCon. And if you're as stoked as I am about this movie, go ahead and let your inner fanboy or fangirl rage in the comments right here. And your fandom can also spill out over on our Facebook and Twitter page at Clever Movies as well. From our studio in Hollywood, I'm Erin Robinson, and I'll see you all next time.